Pickering from Parrot Literary Corner. You know me, your noble and honest host, and I've got exciting news for you. Last anthology, Series 1, The Literary Parrot, did such a great job. We want to continue to provide this community service to our viewers and to our contributors to the program. So please get up and get a copy immediately. You know, if you're in this book, you want to get a copy. If you're not in the book, you want to get a copy and see what we're doing. You want to be excited with us. We want you on this program, and we hope to see you sometime soon on The Literary Parrot. You have to get your hands on this copy. It's amazing. It's an absolutely beautiful anthology meant just for you. Our past guests have been invited back to contribute yet again to this Series 2. We do this quarterly anthology. We will be doing this after our 200 episode milestone. As of this last quarter, we reached 200 episodes, and past that, get up and get a copy immediately. This is the only TV show on Earth for creative writers, and our guests are amazing. They're also community activists building from the ground up. This program is for everybody out there who is a creative mind. Order several copies if you can and donate to local libraries. Give them to your friends, cousins, fans, supporters, anybody that you think loves poetry. And it's not just poetry in this book. Remember, this is creative mind. So we have prose, fiction, short stories, essays, artwork, anything you can think of, artistically creative, photographs. Everything in this book is packed. It is packed. It is just absolutely packed. If you want to get your hands on it now. Hi, welcome to World Anchors Network. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host, as previously mentioned in the commercial. And today is episode 235, so let's congratulate ourselves on that milestone. Today we have Chuck Joy. Chuck Joy has been publishing poetry since 1980. Poetry collections include Percussive, Said the Growling Dog, Theme of Line, and Fun Poetry. A poet committed to performance, he is featured at venues in Erie, Cleveland, and New York City. Chuck hosted weekly poetry events in Erie for many years. As a child psychiatrist, he completed training in Morgantown, West Virginia, and has practiced in Erie since 1987, and is a board member of the Institute for Poetic Medicine. Chuck was Poet Laureate of Erie County, Pennsylvania from 2018 to 2021. Thanks for joining us, Chuck. How is life in Erie today?
Well, it could be colder, I guess, Dustin, but I'm excited to be here. This is such a nice opportunity. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. I want to thank all our viewers at the moment, and thanks for watching. Remember, you can comment live as we're talking, and so if you have any questions or comments you want to make on the program, feel free, guys out there watching right now. So my first question would be, how would you describe your poetic style?
Well, I guess primarily narrative. I really have a strong tendency to have a sort of a through going line of meaning, but not always. I'm real attentive to the rhythm of the words, and that guides me as a rule. I also like to write poetry that I like to say you can watch, so it's usually fairly visual and containing images.
So when you say visual in terms of on the written page, I mean you write for performance. Does that somehow translate onto the page for you as well?
Well, I believe in the graphic presentation of a poem, but I tend to left justify. So on the page, it's usually a matter of stanza breaks and line lengths in terms of the graphic appearance, but the content of the words is often descriptive.
Interesting. So when you say descriptive, what kind of things do you like to go into in the terms of the description? Is there a specific, like do you describe, like in a story you would describe the surroundings but in poetry, how would you define description, and what would you describe?
Usually a setting, something very physical, like I say, sort of a visual element. A place, location. I have a whole collection of poems that were chosen around the fact that they present location. So that's
Okay.
important to me. Part of the reason I write is to go places. Although I try to be very aware and meditative about my actual surroundings, I'm very subject to flights of the imagination.
Do you think imagination can connect you to places you've never been or places you're maybe familiar with just in books and you can write about places like that and through your imagination?
Yes, and I also think imagination can connect us as poets to realms that don't exist at all, let alone never been. So, that's a high art to me. Mostly, I'm a little more grounded to reality than that. I have, Dustin, on occasion, been so excited about taking a trip that I've begun to imagine it in poetry before the trip ever happens. And when the
Wow.
trip on occasion is canceled, the only reality that's left is the poem of the imaginary trip.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. You have snapshots in your mind then of the place you were going to go and didn't have a chance to go, or it's a memory bank of sorts.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's something that never happened.
Right.
Pretend
That's pretty
memory.
interesting.
Yeah, I
So,
like
do you? I'm curious about your book, Fun Poetry. Why is it titled Fun Poetry? Is it part of your mission as healing people through poetry to, present more of something, lively or more entertaining in that spectrum of thought than something a little more fact based or something like? Is it when you say fun poetry? What does that mean, and why did you title the book that?
it's great that you've started off with that. It's part of my mission to have fun with words,
Mhm.
and that's sort of a major gratification that I get. That's part of the whole point, is to have fun. And if there's anything healing or child psychiatric about it, it's because that profession keeps me in touch with children and having fun. So I suppose I had fun as a child, but as the adult I am now, the most fun I have is imagining words and transcribing them. So there's a sense of fun and play. That's another word I would put out there, play.
Interesting. So, what kind of when you play with language, what sort of things do you find that you enjoy playing with most? Is it like word combinations or structures, or how do you play with the words in that sense?
Well, it's usually always stringing them along some sort of line going through them. And so the sound is important and the content. The play is just bringing the words together in a way that makes sense. And to me, it's poetry because it's done one line at a time.
Mhm.
Uh, Line breaks and enjambment exist and are there for fun and play, but what I'm trying to do is have every line be its own um, experience.
Interesting. And so, do you find that your experience with child psychiatry is sort of giving you any kind of insight into writing at all, or does it influence you in your writing skills or your approach to writing, your aesthetics?
Sure, in many ways, although I was a poet before I was a child psychiatrist, I think what
Mhm.
it's added to is not only in terms of awareness of play, but also depth of meaning and healing is a big factor now. I think poetry is uh, maybe intrinsically healing, depending on how it's used. Not all the time, but it certainly can be a method to provide personal growth and healing, and that's close to the child psychiatry mission too.
Mhm. I think so. I definitely agree that when I read a poem, I feel fulfilled in some way, and I think that poetry has that ability. Why do you think it's able to fulfill someone emotionally in reading a poem?
Well, it's really more in the writing of it. I think
Right.
that the opportunity to I find poetry very close to meditative states, and from that perspective, sort of the flow, which is another super important component, uh, is surprising. And in that surprise, the writer discovers and manages feelings and facts about, in my case, himself, that are I think helpful.
Hmm. So do you find in your
Yeah.
poetry career, looking back on it, do you go through stages where you like here in this particular moment, like how Picasso had a blue period and a red period or whatever, do you have stages in your career as you're publishing? You find that maybe your style drifts a different way on the next book, or so how would you describe how you started off and then how you've moved in direction since then?
Well, I think I sort of feel like I managed to sort of understand how to transcribe my thoughts in a line by line fashion that I found satisfying. And I've maintained that activity throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different publications are organized around different um, themes. There have been different periods of my life, probably that have, like, for example, I feel I've said on many occasions that the poetry that I wrote around 2016 or 17, or even maybe still, is a lot more tragic and sort of unhappy, or sort of just not happy
Mm-hmm.
than I had done before. I have a chapbook. I don't have it right with me here, but when I look at it, I recognize how that all those poems, which were kind of from a period of time, reflect distress.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always the case. Another time, I had a project involving trying to bring together poems that were prompted from the medical context. I did that for a staged poetry show at a theater in Erie, and where the poems I had written were read by a diverse cast, and that was a sort of a stage. And then more recently, during one of my terms as poet laureate here in Erie, Pennsylvania, Erie County, Pennsylvania, I produced as a project a staged reading of poems by Edgar Lee Masters from Spoon River Anthology in particular, and that had a big effect on me. I'm anticipating that my next publication is going to be sort of a tribute to Edgar Lee Masters and Spoon River Anthology, consisting of poems that I wrote in that style. Style particularly where every poem is titled with the name of and written in the voice of a fictional character who is dead.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Masters did in Spoon River, and I found that very compelling. And then just to conclude, more recently, I recognized this tendency to want to write poems that I say poetry you watch. In other words, that are sort of the poetic equivalent of a film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that effort sort of was highly influenced by the Fireside Theater and other efforts toward theater of the mind through words.
Interesting. So you take different approaches, and you go. I think when life is different aspects of life can influence poetry. You mentioned stress, or sometimes you're in a good mood, and when you're writing, it reflects, the mood reflects in that. And it's interesting you mentioned Edgar Lee Masters, because in February, actually next month, we're going to be my publishing company is going to publish a newly done selected version of his poetry, spanning his entire career. So that'll be with Ryan Guth as editor. So that's coming out actually next month. So you can look forward to that. I'll have to get you in touch with us when we publish that. So it's really going to be fun. We've got the book already ready together and everything, so it's ready to go. But we just need to release it. Hopefully, we get some good reviews on it. And then my press is called Transcendent Zero Press. Just so you know, I mean, it's a fun title to roll off your tongue. Transcendent Zero Press. So when you're
Yeah,
organizing,
that's great.
it'll be fun. I will hopefully you'll pick up a copy when it comes out. We'll hopefully get it out pretty soon here. So that'll be a great addition to your collection. It's called Down into This Land is the title of the book. So what do you so when you organize events, what is the process like for you? I mean, obviously you wouldn't do it if you didn't enjoy it, but how do you go about as poet laureate? What kind of things do you organize, and what can be attributed to you as far as the you know um capacity to to organize an event, or what do you do as a poet laureate exactly?
Well, the major identity is poet, so anything sort of other than that is distraction, and that's true of producer, and it's true of poet laureate too. The poet laureate of Erie County, Pennsylvania, is expected to administer a project, and everybody knows that going in. So part of the selection process is to include sort of consideration of what's proposed as a project. And in my case, I had that opportunity twice. My original project had several parts to it. And from that experience, my next project had basically one part to it. So the original project had a lot of stage poetry. There was a gala evening of poetry on the great community theater stage called the Erie Playhouse. We had local poets and all the poets laureate in the history of Erie County, as well as a guest, an out-of-town guest. That was very exciting. But other parts of the project included things like a poetry therapy conference where, the therapeutic power of poetry was the central feature. Erie, Pennsylvania, the city of Erie has sister cities, international sister cities. So part of that original project was to enhance the relationships between Erie and its sister cities through poetry, which led to many wonderful adventures, ranging from having a poem I wrote precede a delegation from Erie, Pennsylvania to Zibo, China. I picture it as on a high staff with sort of ribbons around it. I'm not sure it was done quite like that, but anyway, it's over there somewhere. The delegation took my poem and matched it to an artwork and prepared it as a poster. Very exciting. To turning out to have the poet laureate of Cincinnati, Ohio, come to Erie to appear as a featured poet at one of our weekly events. Because he was originally from a city in Mexico, which is one of Erie's sister cities, and other projects occurred in that way. The second term, where I had learned to be a little bit more focused, was largely about Spoon River Anthology. I partnered with our Erie County Public Library, then under the direction of Mr. Blaine Desi, and my energy was to do the staged reading. It's not an original idea. There was one done at Edinburgh University, not far from Erie, during my adulthood. However, this just spoke to me so strongly, and it was an opportunity. So the thrill there was to gather a diverse cast and choose the poems and go through the process of casting and sharing that with the audience, hosting it and participating in it. But Mr. Desi, Blaine, also brought in the intellectual side. So prior to us doing the stage show, of which there's a terrific video that exists, we had a seminar regarding Spoon River Anthology and the poetry of 100 years ago that involved experts from several of the colleges and universities that are in the Erie, Pennsylvania area. Erie is kind of a center of higher education, and professors from Edinburgh, Mercyhurst University, and Gannon University all participated in a learned consideration of Spoon River Anthology, the poetry of 100 years ago, on stage at the library stage. So all of that was just that was fun poetry.
Interesting. Yeah, fun poetry, right? Maybe we'll hear some of that a little bit later on the program. So, do you find that people are more interested in poetry on the higher the education level, or do you find that maybe it's a pretty wide spectrum of people that are interested in reading and writing poetry?
Wide spectrum. I've been involved in community poetry events for decades. And it's remarkable to me the wide spectrum of people who are drawn to appearing at open mics and sharing from the stage. And it's impressive to me. And people of a wide range of socioeconomic and other identity factors, as well as sometimes mental health and illness. It's really a broad, just to go back to something we talked about earlier in terms of fun poetry, I think it's true of myself and many others. We're drawn to poetry in suffering and in tragedy and having the blues. I think I'm unusual in just, maybe it's because this contact with the act of play, but a lot of my poetry is kind of happy for a poet, because it seems like lots of it is disturbed or enraged or hurt. So there's some thoughts.
Yeah, I think I write, when I write a lot of poetry, it tends to be intoned with mourning, a sense of loss and people grieving and things like that. I went through a lot of grief experiences, and I think that intoned my poetry very young. But it's interesting that you say that poetry does come out as a thing of from pain a lot of times, and people go to it when they're in travail or they're having troubled times. They find some sort of hope or some sort of anchor in the poetry. We're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back with Chuck's poetry. Stay tuned. World Inkers Network.
They often wonder aloud, can't we go back to the good old days when protesters were like Martin Luther King Jr., peaceful?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
We answer, have you forgotten he was murdered as well?
What so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming.
Hoses, dogs, batons beat faces and heads, causing blood to spill.
Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous
jail cells moaned for relief as they were filled past capacity with black men in three-piece suits.
O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming.
Bridges blocked on a bloody Sunday,
and the rockets reckless, the bombs bursting in air.
A church firebombed, flames dispatching 4 innocent little black girls off to see heaven's gates.
Gave proof through the night that our flag was still
Volunteer
there.
voter registrars shot in their car as peaceful protesters were found dead on the side of a dimly lit road.
Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave?
Young black men sent to fight and die in war, yet here sharing lunch counters with whites was against the law.
Or the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Were those really the good old days?
Welcome back to World Inkers Network. That was Dion Hunter. Wonderful, emotive performance. So Chuck here with Chuck Joy. We have him available for some poetry. Would you like to read us a couple of words from your works?
I would love to.
Thank you.
And based on our conversation so far, I think I had already mentioned a couple of things that could lead to a couple of poems to share.
Okay.
Here's one. This is a 2-part poem. It's called Left Justify Me, Baby. 1. My whole life becomes the poem, an openness for words to arrange in rows. I think it's the closeness of death, the embrace we share, lovers, keeps my ears open to that music. filling like a thin bag with the unspeakable, seeks its own level, through gesture and symbol comes to the table. Is it true we write and write and write until we get there where we're going and say it, and then we're done? I doubt it. I think that was the first poem. Although it's possible, I guess, if speech be replaced by silence or text, nothing but characters grouped in words, then lines. 2. When I was young, the lines were free to roam about the page like sheep, a herd, settling for sleep. Or fish, their dark shapes backlit from a distant sun. The line placement very heavily influenced by pale paper-bound books, their lines spaced all over the place. Books written by poets in tight sweaters at typewriters. Grace something, 36. Imagine her grocery lists. God bless Grace. I have had my fun. I have become preoccupied with line, delivering line, line after line. Left justify me, baby.
How would you define the speaker in that? Is that the poem speaking, or is that the poet writing is speaking?
I'm going to just say off the top of my head, since the very first word is a personal pronoun, is probably the poet speaking, yes, and maybe even this particular one. Now, Dustin, I had a mishap with my glasses. It happened on New Year's Eve, but it's not like that. Nonetheless, they're gone. The glasses is gone.
Wow.
So while I'm waiting to get those replaced, I have these sort of helpful enough reading glasses that I'm putting on because they're helpful for reading.
Right.
So there you go.
Well, you have to have glasses to read. You have to have glasses to read. Right.
And I was hoping to read another poem, so
Sure,
the
go ahead.
glasses will help me.
All right.
This poem, I think, reflects my belief of writing one line at a time. It's called Every Line a Character.
Okay.
Every line deserves the same attention. Each line a terrific friend. You can name them. Here's a line named Brendan. Say goodbye, Brendan. Now, Bridget, she's a funny line, a punch line, complete with sly wink. No stunning images for her, no dreamy verbal flights, just a chuckle. That's a lot. Jimmy imagines the Great Plains, as do his 5 or 6 neighbors. They're like a gang. They're like Mad Earl James. Dylan establishes a big... That's it. He just stops. Call this line Simon, with its thump, thump, bang, and a larger theme like a talking drum, come all the way from Africa. Our job is to read each line with its personality, every line a character in the spotlight, center stage, then gone. Thank you.
Quite funny, and I thought that was interesting naming the lines. And yeah, that was pretty interesting. You gave it kind of a character, as you said, to each line. Would you like to read another one?
I would. Another area of poetry that I contribute to is Italian American poetry.
Okay.
And this collection of fun poetry has a section called Fun Italian American Poems. And one that I'd like them all. Here's one that I'd like to read called Driving Backwards. This neighborhood is not the same. That used to be a little restaurant on that corner. I think it was Guido's Blue Moon. I remember the minestrone. And there, that was a Catholic school. After it closed, they said they maybe could develop. What was it? Arson? Maybe we need more of that. And there, that used to be a park. I used to play there with my cousins. Big cypress trees and lanterns in the dark, flowers and flagstone paths and picnic tables where the grown-ups sat, and some of them smoked and drank beer that doesn't exist anymore. I can still hear them and see their long legs. A lot of them are dead, or they live in Colorado. And those three old storefronts, there was a bakery, there was a barber shop, and that one was a newsstand where a terrible mountain of a man sold candy and cigarettes and magazines and numbers. And in the winter, you could hear the crunch of boots against the snow, and people rang handbells, ding, ding, and Christmas trees were sold. And in the summer, there were nothing but convertibles parked here, and guys would drive them backwards down the street. Oh, baby. This neighborhood is dying like a person. Last one left goes to the nursing home. Thank you.
Interesting. I find it, the kind of interesting that you called it with driving backwards, and then it seems like it's a looking back on all these things that have been present in the community in the poem, and then you go further on and it becomes present tense as it goes to the end there. It's quite interesting, a way of kind of, it gives you almost an illusion of driving backwards, like literally in time. So,
well, that's wonderful, and I'd like to claim that was all engineered, but in fact, I think it's more the sort of quality that's inherent in any material. So, the idea of driving backwards through an Italian neighborhood is something that I've experienced. I've seen it on film, and it stays with me. So it's using that as an organization to the creation of poetry, transcribing that sort of verbal product near meditation, then just sort of provides its own momentum in a way, and the metaphor kind of extends as far as it can go. I really enjoyed your take on that, Dustin. That was great.
Yeah, it's an interesting poem. I enjoyed it, and I liked your performance quite a bit. It brings to life the qualities of the poem. There's a little bit of humor and a little bit of dark, at the end there, especially. Somewhat funny how sometimes you can actually laugh at some of the dark moments in life. And I think, reading, if you're, an astute reader, you especially find that there's wisdom to life, and we're not here permanently. We're not going to stick around, and eventually we're going to leave the planet, and whatever happens after that happens. So, we might as well just sort of look at some of these dark moments as blips on the screen in a way, Do you have any other favorite poets besides Edgar Lee Masters, of course, we mentioned earlier? Do you have any favorite poets you like to return to from time to time?
Yes, and of two kinds. One are the kind of poets that I know from their work on the page and in books, and the other are poets that I know from the poetry community. So to go from that first group, Billy Collins has been a very influential person. I've actually met Billy Collins on a couple of occasions, and my collection of Billy Collins is big and important to me. So there's him. Charles Bukowski is another who's been very, I believe, influential on me. From the local poets, there's a fella in Erie who's frequently published named Matt Borzon, who writes a very short line. And in terms of our earlier discussion about stages of writing, I think my poems tend to vary between very short lines and longer lines like that. Driving Backwards are pretty long lines, but a lot of my poems and it's kind of arbitrary. Some are short. The last two I wrote was one longer and one shorter, but that's another favorite poet who I can speak to. There and the St. Vincent Millay. I don't claim to be a scholar of her in any way, but the impact of her poem Recuerdo on me is enough to it's a greatest hit, just tremendous. Wow. And there's another poet named Yutsu Sharma who hails from Kathmandu, who I am privileged to have known, and he's had an impact on my own work and publishing, and from the category of poets I know, he's one. The current poet laureate of Erie County, Pennsylvania is Sean Thomas Doherty, very powerful, well-published poet. And this is a topic I could talk more on, but there's a whole bunch of names from both from the library as well as down the street.
Well, it's good that we get some names. I think I've heard of Sean Thomas Daughtery. I believe I think I've heard that name a few times being mentioned.
You played Dion Hunter during the break, and I believe if she's from Northeastern Ohio, our paths may have crossed. And I see her on Facebook. That's another place for poets, and another poet from that area is John Burroughs. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of poets, Ray McNeese, and people from Northeastern Ohio. George Wallace is a poet I know in New York City. George Gaida used to be in New York City. Diane Borsnick from Ohio. Scott Williams in Buffalo. C. Williams in Erie, Berwin Moore in Erie. This is turning into a litany.
So what would your final words be to the audience and conclusion of the program?
Well, based on our discussion so far, I'll just circle back around to that idea of play. Even such a melancholy experience of driving backwards, the play is in putting the words together, and the topic happens to be painful, but that sort of thing can be applied to everything. And then keep in mind the sort of quality of doing that toward personal growth and healing. So that's my message. I try to get it right the first time, but I'm willing to edit as the spirit moves me.
Excellent. So you have any shout outs you'd like to throw out there? Say hello to anybody, family, friends, other poets?
I would be remiss if I did not greet my wife, Dawn Joy. Hey, Dawn, good to see you. I couldn't answer your phone call because I was in this interview, but I love you.
Excellent. So thank you so much for joining us, Chuck. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. This is World Anchors Network. We had Chuck Joy today on this episode. So if you missed it, go back and watch it again. And it was incredible. We talked about poetry as play, and we talked about a lot of other things, and then dropped some names on some poets you can check out who are live and some that are from the library, as Chuck mentioned. So if you'd like to support this program, we can get you through PayPal. You can send us some money out there through paypal.me/nyparrot. That would help us out significantly for donations. And you can also purchase our anthologies. We have Parrot, Literary Parrot Series 1 and Parrot Series 2. Just look up the Literary Parrot Series 1 or Literary Parrot Series 2 on Amazon, and we'll get you. You can buy those copies, and you'd love to see some new work out there, fresh on the market, worldwide, international voices. And if you want to be on the program, you can send your bio and a headshot to literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com, and that'll be a wonderful way to support the program. If you don't want to do it monetarily, we'd love to have you on this program. It helps us create content, and it helps you promote your work. So don't be afraid to get in contact with me at literarycorner at newyorkparrot.com. This has been an excellent program today with World Inkers Network. I hope you guys have an excellent afternoon. Get out and do some writing. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hi, I am Dustin Pickering from Parrot Literary Corner. You know me, your noble and honest host, and I've got exciting news for you. Last anthology, Series 1, The Literary Parrot, did such a great job. We want to continue to provide this community service to our viewers and to our contributors to the program. So please get up and get a copy immediately. You know, if you're in this book, you want to get a copy. If you're not in the book, you want to get a copy and see what we're doing. You want to be excited with us. We want you on this program, and we hope to see you sometime soon on The Literary Parrot. You have to get your hands on this copy. It's amazing. It's an absolutely beautiful anthology meant just for you. Our past.
Listen to the